All right, we are back for another episode of The Drive. My name is Andy Lack. I'm joined, as always, by Geoff Fienberg. Well, 1 week hiatus on the PGA Tour, but we are back with the Worldwide Technologies Championship. New host course for us this week, as the Greg Norman designed Mayakoba has joined the Live Tour now. So what is the best antidote to a Greg Norman departure? New Tiger Woods design on the PGA Tour. First look at a Tiger Woods course ever. This was actually the first course he's ever designed, and it's the first time we're seeing any of his work host a professional golf tournament. Before we get into the odds board, want to give a quick shout to the weekly odds checker contest that we run every single week. Big prizes up top. The link and all of the info for that is in the description at the bottom of this video. So when you check this out, you can find the link to do that and all of the info that you need. We would love to see you join. As always, big money at the top. I believe you correctly predict the top 5 golfers in order. So we will be continuing to run that throughout the fall swing. Make sure to sign up with all of that info in the description. Jeffrey, Mexico, Pass Palm Golf Course, wide open, big fairways, big greens. Hopefully we get some wind to create a little bit of spiciness, because under calm conditions, I think we could see some pretty low scores down here. But El Cardinal this week, you psyched to get golf back in the mix after a worthy little vacation?
I'm not going to lie. I wish there were more weeks like last week in the fall. It allows me to have like that zest in the dog days of summer when I'm not, like all in the fall. But we've seen so far through the fall, Andy, as it was last year, I believe, a lot of chalk season. Max, Sahith, Colin, the better players just seem like they can go to these fields and bully them. It's a new course. What I hate about new courses and the variable of a swing season event, where it feels like there's a lot of variables to begin with, and unknowns, I should say, is that we've never been here. I don't know what sort of player profile to expect. I don't know what sort of winning score to expect. I do know, as you mentioned, they were sort of put in this spot where they had to find a change of location. And like all courses in Mexico, it's a resort course. It's for weekend warriors. I'm sure it'll be tipped out, but I'm expecting bonanzas, unless Tiger, out of a point of pride, is like intentionally going to make it impossible. But he knows this is just his Mexican resort course. No one's holding Tiger's architectural abilities. No one's holding Tiger to the scores of this week.
Yeah, 1 or 2 notes on the course before we get into the odds board. It's going to be very similar to what we have seen at golf courses like Vidanta Vallarta, the host of the Mexico Championship that we get in, I believe, May, Corrales, Punta Cana, all of these tropical golf courses that, as you mentioned, are pretty much there for the purpose of fulfilling the needs of resort guests and not really used to hosting professional golf tournaments. Unless we get a ton of wind, we are probably going to see some really low scores that I think could probably get to the 20, 25 under neighborhood. The wind is kind of like the biggest defense to prevent that. As you mentioned, the course is long, but sheer length is not the type of thing that is going to prevent tour players from making a ton of birdies. You probably are going to see a lot of long irons. Like I have it as when I mapped it out, 50-ish% of approach shots could come from over 175 yards, but these greens are massive, 8,300 square feet on average. Pass palms are really slow surface too. So I looked a lot at like slow green putting, par 5 scoring. Pass palms are really easy surface to chip off of. I don't expect something like short game to be incredibly important this week. We're going to see a pretty astronomically high greens in regulation percentage. So with that in mind, I think it's pretty fascinating to look at the 2 guys at the top of the odds board, Ludwig Aberg, as we should say after learning the correct pronunciation at the Ryder Cup, and Cameron Young, looking to get his first PGA Tour win. Kind of crazy to believe that both the 2 guys at the top of the odds board, Geoff, you probably make the argument are the 2 best players currently on the PGA Tour without a win. followed right behind by Sahith Theegala, who finally broke through a couple weeks ago in Napa. So with that course profile in mind of like power off the tee, long irons, got to go out and make your birdies, like how much interest would you say that you have on those 2-3 guys at the top?
A lot. Let's be real. A lot. It is a lot. I feel like I can swing and miss at the top this week. Maybe I missed the chance to hit chalk in the swing season because it's been flooding, as I already mentioned. But between the course profile and what these guys do, I am very tempted. Cam Young hasn't played in a bit, but more so than Ludwig. Well, I lean Ludwig. I'll put that perfectly clear.
Me too.
Cam Young, to me, much like Morikawa, doesn't have majors, doesn't have all those wins, but like the no-win thing is like embarrassing. It's embarrassing. He tees it up to win all the time. But there is like an absolute hyper emphasis to get this win before the calendar of 24 starts. In the same way I said that about Colin and Xander while not betting either of them in Japan due to wind droughts. In its own way, this is pretty big, and it's not a wind drought because there's not like a one win waiting for the next win. It's like period, no win. So those would be the guys I definitely lean Ludwig. I'm willing to bet Ludwig at 9-1 on a resort course. I might lose money responsibly.
I think I'm with you there. I think that the fact that Ludwig probably doesn't have some of the rust that Cameron Young has. Like the last time that we saw Cameron Young play in a professional golf tournament was, I believe, the BMW Championship, like all the way back in August, whereas Ludwig's played 5 times since then, including the Ryder Cup and including already multiple events this fall swing. So at the top, it's a pretty steep price to pay, but I'd probably go in the direction of Ludwig as well. Once we get into this next tier, we're looking at guys like Emiliano Grillo, Lucas Glover, Stephan Jaeger, Bo Hostler's been playing some great golf. JJ Spawn, Thomas Dietrich. I know both of us are a sucker for him from time to time. So anyone else in this kind of short to mid tier of guys in the 20s to 40s, or is this a kind of Ludwig and Bombs week for you?
Yeah, it might have to be Ludwig in the back. I will say, was on Grillo in Japan.
Yeah.
And he had great form, and you could slice up Emiliano any way you want. But he has shown one thing, Andy, like he rides form. So if I do bet Ludwig, I don't know that I can get there at 28-1, but I will invest myself in Grillo in other ways. I will have to be there. He rides his form. He is in form now. I think it's a layout that can work lovely for him and those long irons you speak of. I'm just not willing to bet Jaeger. It's just not a thing I do. If people catch it or he catches it, obviously, I'll just tip my cap to him and say, congrats, pal. Same with Bo Hostler. Probably even same with Detry at 33-1. And Ashkay is probably still too cheap for my liking. He seemed like a popular play out of the gates this morning, having dropped below many of the 40s that were there at the Open looking at this grid.
I will say I completely understand the Akshay love. I mean, he looked amazing in Mexico at Vidanta Vallarta. I think that's probably the strongest comp that we have to this week. Jaeger as well. Like Jaeger is another guy who I believe he has a 15th, 18th, and 13th in his last 3 past Palm performances. So like he's the type of player that continues to rate out incredibly well for me statistically and always seems to pop and raise his baseline at these tropical, wide open past Palm, long irons, power off the tee. Jaeger's like a really good long iron player, pretty good slow green putter as well. So I would say those are probably my 2 favorites, or I at least understand the attention that they're garnering on Monday morning. I'm a little bit less inclined to bet Bo Hostler at a number like that, given the massive weakness that he still has with his irons and how dependent he is still on his putter. Once we get past those guys, Geoff, it's a lot of Chris Kirks, Keith Mitchells, Justin Suh, your guy Davis Thompson in the 50-1 range. Like there's a massive group of guys between 50 and 100. I think there's some great options in like the 80s and 90s that we can talk about. I bet a number of guys in the 80s and 90s because I'm still making my decision if I'm going to go with a big bet on Ludwig at the top with you. I wanted to kind of leave my options open and have room if I decide to go in that direction. So kind of the only moves that I've made personally thus far are a few guys in the 80s, 90s, and at like 100 and 150.
Well, we can tease that for a moment, and I'll name drop some of the names in front of that. But stay tuned because Andy's got some long shots right in the middle of the board. You mentioned it. Haven't pulled the trigger. I think every time we've done something in the swing season, I've included Davis Thompson.
Yeah.
He's been consistent, but consistent doesn't get it done. Like, consistent doesn't cash outright tickets. It can win you a prop. It can win you money in DFS, but it ain't winning you an outright. So there's a decision I've got to make there. And at 50-1, there's a decision I will make. I will be betting on Taylor Pendrith this week, Andy. Third at the Shriners, ninth at the Barbasol, 3 missed cuts in between. Really hard sort of guy to figure out. But I do believe in the ceiling that is Pendrith. Geez, you're looking at his last 6 starts. There's a 14th, a 6th, and a 3rd, and 3 missed cuts. So he's got a bit of a boomer bust. But in that outright market, with his skill set, like that's a chance I'm willing to take Taylor Pendrith 50-1.
Yeah, I think using the Pendrith mold, there's a lot of guys in the 50-1 tennis range that you could say
poor man's Pendriths for me that pay double is what you're saying.
Well, yeah. So I was thinking about, I love Peter Kuest, who's at 90-1, and Peter Kuest is like the only guy that you're going to find in this entire field in the 90-1 range. That's a top 10 long iron player in this field and is one of the longest drivers of the ball in this field. So I'm going to continue to roll the dice on Peter Kuest. I think we're still pretty early on him. Like, there's a young guy who's already contended multiple times on the PGA Tour at a lot of these easier birdie fests. And I still think that you could totally capitalize him at 90-1. I've seen a little bit of this already on Twitter, but I'm sure you're not privy to the Brandon Wu success on Pass Palm. He's finished 2nd and 3rd at the Mexico Open in his only 2 appearances there. He's got another super high-end tropical finish there. I don't think it was at Corrales, but it might have been at Corrales is the Dominican. No, that's Punta Cana. So he's got another high-end finish at one of the other tropical ones, but essentially there's not a single player in this field that raises their baseline more on these tropical Pass Palm courses than Brandon Wu. He's the number 1 Pass Palm player in this entire field. You can find him at 80-1. Another one of those guys that like really steps up their game on these wide open tropical golf courses is Harry Hall, 150-1. He's got back-to-back top 26 finishes in his last 2 starts at the Zozo and the Shriners. So there's a ton of options to be had here. Like, once you get into the 80s, 90s, 100s, like Brandon Wu, Michael Kim, Peter Kuest, Harry Hall, Greyson Sigg, like a lot of those guys I have a ton of interest in.
And I got to point this out because as much as you and I seem to, fawn over what could be at the top this week, and we didn't even talk about Sahith, who might just barrel roll all the Ludwig and Cam bets. Very possible. If you like these guys at the back, you don't have to be like, if I was in love with the back, I could double click a lot of guys and not have the fear of the top. Like, as much as I love Ludwig, as much as we all know how good Cam Young could be, should be, will be, I totally get if you're peppering 80-1s, 100-1s, 150-1, 60-1s, being like, you know what? Like, with all due respect, I respect their talent, but I don't respect them as it relates to the outright board, and I'm going to throw darts because the top doesn't garner my respect. If that's your POV this week, I can't argue with you one bit.
Right, which is always a worthy strategy on a golf course where putting is incredibly important because those are the tournaments with much higher variance. And this is going to be a golf course with like an astronomically high greens and regulation. So putting's going to have to be a large part of the calculus. Just to put a bow on Brandon Wu, that other Pass Palm finish that I was looking for, 7th at the Puerto Rico Open at Grand Reserve Golf Club. So he is a 2nd, a 3rd, and a 7th in his last 3 appearances on Pass Palm. You're not going to find a player that has been better than that over his last 3 on these types of resort
I'll
courses.
probably have to bet a little on Brandon Wu because it won't
Yeah,
be fun
80's a
on
good
the
number.
It won't be fun on the internet Sunday when everyone in the orbit has a Brandon Wu ticket, and you're losing money on football games. Not
Right.
Andy though. Not
Right. And
Andy.
you have to wait till
Other people might lose
Monday
money on
night
football
to
games.
Chargers Jets.
Yeah, yeah. Either way, other people might lose money on football games. Not me. I had a great week, but most weeks Andy is crushing it. So check out his Twitter feed to keep an eye on where you can get his ATS NFL plays. But yeah, Brandon Wu, a lot of steam. There's 80s now. Even if our friends at Odds Checker, Andy, when they post this, if they did it immediately, Brandon Wu might be 60-1.
I think so.
Like
so,
and yeah. it might get shorter because it does seem like there's a consensus Brandon Wu. A lot of people who have access to the each way the placing bettings are, also pretty happy to bet Brandon Wu 80-1 with multiple placings. That I have certainly seen. Yeah, so for me, if it's Ludwig at the top, and the other guys I would consider if I don't make that play, as I mentioned, Grillo, Pendrith, Thompson, and even Davis Riley always catches a bit of my interest here. His ceiling, his skill set, 66-1 against these names. I could be interested in a Davis Riley this week, Andy. So that's the names on my circle.
Yeah, I mentioned Peter Kuest, Greyson Sigg, Carson Young, Harry Hall. A little more interest in Jaeger than you at the top. I share your same opinion on Ludwig, where I think it's not the worst week to throw all your chips into the table in that one. Chris Goddard, the only other guy I mentioned, really, really talented player. Great career at Rutgers, Korn Ferry Tour graduate recently. He's at 60-1. Like, that's pretty short for a Korn Ferry Tour guy. So I think that tells you the Bucks are pretty onto him already. And he does have that similar profile where just a ton of power off the tee, great long iron player. One of the better, I believe that he will be not a Ludwig-esque driver of the ball, but I think coming out of the gates, he will establish himself pretty quickly as one of the better drivers of the ball on the PGA Tour as a rookie.
I love that. And I'm going to throw one name at you getting out the door here. Austin Eckroat was like, we all fangirled over him after the Open Championship, where there's like a string of really low tier events before we sort of get into FedEx Cup season. Could this be like a time like the winds are down?
Goodbye, low.
This could be time to maybe get back on the Eckroat train.
5th at the Corrales as well, I believe. Actually, it was 3rd at the Corrales, just looking at it now. So he's got that good track record on Pass Palm already. Corrales, like another, probably outside of Vidanta Vallarta, my second strongest correlation course. So love the Eckroat mention as well. Jeffrey, another week before we kind of wrap things up. I think we've got Mexico, Butterfield, Bermuda, and then RSM, and then we get another pretty substantial break between Thanksgiving right into Christmas before we kick things off at Kapalua in a couple weeks in January. So for me, I'm Andy Lack. That is Geoffrey Fienberg. Once again, make sure to check out the link in the description to enter into that weekly odds checker contest. This was another episode of The Drive, and we will see you next time.